I was sitting quietly at the table beside my 7-year-old grandson during my son's second wedding. Suddenly, he gripped my hand tightly and whispered, "Grandma, I want to leave right now." I asked him what was wrong. He trembled and said, "Grandma, you didn't look under the table, did you?" I slowly lowered my eyes and froze. I took his hand, and we stood up in silence. "I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled." I sat in the center of the wedding hall, a ballroom glowing with candlelight, next to my little grandson, the child I love more than life itself. Today was the wedding of my son, Alex, to his second wife, Ava. My little boy, Leo, was distractedly sliding his red toy car back and forth across the spotless white tablecloth. His bright eyes seemed lost in a world of their own, untouched by the chatter of the adults nearby. I looked at him, and my heart softened. I gently adjusted the tiny bow tie around his neck, a motion as tender as touching the memory of his mother, Maria, whose sweet smiles I still remember as if they happened yesterday. Soft jazz melodies drifted through the room, blending with the hum of voices and the clinking of glasses. The ballroom was lavishly decorated, with arrangements of pure white roses on every table and candlelight reflecting off gleaming silverware. I lifted my gaze, searching for Alex. He was moving from one table to another, raising his glass and thanking guests with a bright smile that tried to hide the emptiness I knew was still in his heart since Maria passed away. Across the room, Ava, my son's new bride, stunning in her beaded wedding gown, posed for photos with her friends. Her smile was flawless, untouched by doubt, as if the entire world belonged to her. I looked at her and felt an odd sensation in my chest, something I couldn't name, but I pushed it aside, telling myself I was just being sensitive. Waiters glided smoothly between tables, pouring more wine, clearing dishes, and fixing napkins. An older couple seated with us turned toward me with gentle smiles. "Leo is growing fast. How old is he now, Betty?" I smiled and answered softly, "He just turned 7. Time flies." Then I turned to cut a small piece of cake for Leo. He looked up, his eyes shining with gratitude, but he quickly lowered his head again and kept pushing his toy car, as though that little toy was the only place he felt safe. Then, all at once, Leo stopped. His small hands stilled, and his wide eyes met mine with a seriousness unusual for him. I was slightly startled. A chill swept through me. He clutched my hand tightly, his fingers ice cold. In an urgent whisper, he said, "Grandma, I want to leave right now." His voice shook, as if he were holding back a fear he couldn't explain. My heartbeat quickened. I leaned toward him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Tell me." Leo shivered and pressed his lips together. Then he whispered so quietly I had to lean in close. "Grandma, you didn't look under the table, did you?" His words cut through me like a blade. A terrible dread grew inside me, making it hard to breathe. I tried to stay composed and smoothed his hair, but the panic in his eyes, a fear no 7-year-old should have, made it impossible to ignore. "It's all right, darling. Let Grandma check," I said, forcing my voice to stay gentle to calm him, even though my heart was hammering. Slowly, I lifted the edge of the white tablecloth and peered into the dim space under the table, where chair legs and Leo's swinging shoes were visible. And that's when I saw it. A tiny piece of paper folded into fourths, lying right next to Leo's chair. It was so small it could have disappeared in the shadows, but its mere presence froze my blood. Leo pressed himself against me, clutching my arm as though he needed protection. I could feel his quick, uneven breaths. Every tremble told me something was very wrong. I crouched down fully and, with a trembling hand, picked up the note. People nearby were still laughing and raising glasses. But in that moment, my world narrowed to just me, Leo, and that paper in my hand. I unfolded it. The candlelight was faint, but enough to read the jagged writing. "Table 8. Add shrimp to the child serving." Just a few words, but they hit me like a punch to the chest. I felt my blood turn cold and the air stall in my lungs. Leo has a severe shrimp allergy, something everyone in the family knows very well. A single piece could endanger his life. Who would write this? Who could be so vicious? And on my son's wedding day, I squeezed Leo's hand, feeling his shaking fingers in mine. I got up quickly, ignoring the startled looks from nearby guests. The elderly couple beside us stopped their conversation and watched me with concern. I held Leo tightly, as if I feared he might disappear if I let go. Laughter and music continued, but to me, everything became a heavy, suffocating silence. Memories from the past flooded over me, pulling me out of that glittering ballroom and back to a time when our family was whole. I once believed my son's home would always echo with laughter, but life, like a sudden gust of wind, blew away that joy, leaving behind wounds that never fully healed. I remember Maria, my first daughter-in-law, the way I remember morning sunlight pouring through a window. Her smile was gentle and warm. She always made me feel like I had a true daughter. Maria never raised her voice, never caused me a moment of worry. She was the kind of person whose presence alone brought peace. I still recall those windy afternoons in the suburbs of Phoenix, when I used to visit Alex and Maria's little home. Leo, who had just learned to walk, would laugh in the backyard as he chased a bright rubber ball. Maria would stand on the porch with a basket of freshly picked vegetables, smiling as she watched her son. "Mom, Betty, try the chili I made. Tell me what you think," she'd say proudly, setting a warm bowl in front of me. I would sit and eat while chatting with her about simple things, and Leo would crawl on the floor with an old toy car. But the memory that is both the most beautiful and the most painful is the night Leo became very ill. He had a dangerously high fever. His little body burned, and his eyes were barely open, with no strength even to cry. Maria held him close while tears rolled silently down her cheeks. "Mom, Betty, I'm so scared," she whispered, her voice shaking. I sat beside her, taking turns placing cool cloths on his forehead to calm her down. "Don't worry, sweetheart. He's strong. He'll pull through." But deep inside, fear pressed on me like a weight. I stayed up with Maria until sunrise, and when the first light appeared, Leo's fever finally went down, and he fell asleep in his mother's arms. Maria turned to me with swollen eyes but a faint smile. "Thank you, Mom. Without you, I don't know what I would have done." I just held her hand and squeezed it firmly, as if trying to tell her I would always be there for her, and for Leo. I believed that little family would stay happy forever, like a song with no final note. But then, one tragic afternoon, everything collapsed. The phone rang while I was washing dishes. A police officer's cold, distant voice came through the line. "Mrs. Williams, we regret to inform you there has been an accident." I don't even remember hearing the rest. My hands trembled so much that I dropped a plate, and it shattered on the floor. Maria was gone instantly when a truck lost control and hit her car on the highway outside the city. I stood frozen, feeling the world crumble around me. Her funeral took place on a day of relentless rain. The drops poured down as though the sky itself mourned her. Leo, only 4 at the time, was in my arms, confused, staring at everyone with innocent eyes, not understanding any of it. "Grandma, where is my mommy?" he asked in his tiny voice. I held him tightly, swallowing my tears, and whispered, "Your mommy is in a very beautiful place, my love." But inside I felt like I was breaking. Alex, my son, knelt before the coffin, his shoulders trembling, unable to speak. I knew he was trying to stay strong, but his eyes were empty, like part of his soul had gone with Maria. After that loss, Alex changed completely. He threw himself into his job. He'd leave early and come back so late that Leo was already asleep. I understood he was running from the pain, trying to fill the enormous emptiness in his heart with endless work. But Leo, my poor boy, suffered the deepest wound. He became quieter. His eyes often looked sad, as if he were waiting for a miracle that would bring his mother back. I became his only source of comfort, I took him to school every morning and sat by his bed every night, rocking him gently. "Grandma, tell me a story about my mommy," he would often ask. And I would, speaking through a tight throat, telling him about the times Maria sang him to sleep, how she cut his fruit into tiny pieces to make his favorite dessert. Each story was my way of keeping Maria's memory alive in his mind and in my heart. Lucy, my adopted daughter, also became essential during those days. With her kind heart and skillful hands, she would often stop by the house, bringing coloring books or cookies she'd baked herself. Lucy loved Leo like a real little brother. She would carry him, teach him to read, or sit with him for hours at the table, helping him with his messy drawings. "Look, Leo, your house turned out nicer than mine," she'd say, laughing with a voice clear as a bell. But sometimes I noticed Lucy watching Alex when he came home in silence after long hours. It was a deep look, carrying something beyond simple sibling affection. I saw it, but I chose to stay quiet. Maybe I was afraid that bringing it up would shatter the fragile balance of what remained of our family. Alex's home slowly lost its laughter, but thanks to Lucy and Leo, the family flame stayed lit, even if only flickering. I did everything I could to keep that light from dying. Yet deep in my heart, I knew both Alex and I were living with wounds that had never healed. Every time I saw Leo asleep, I saw Maria's features in his face, and the pain would return. The memory of that afternoon is still vivid in my mind, as if no time has passed. I was sitting in my small living room, listening to sparrows singing in the yard, my heart full of mixed emotions. It was the first time my son Alex was bringing Ava to introduce her. I tried to open my heart. I tried to see her through the eyes of a mother wanting her son to find happiness again after so much loss. But deep inside, I couldn't shake a strange uneasiness, like a cold wind making me shiver. That afternoon, Alex arrived later than usual. I was in the kitchen making Leo's favorite tacos when I heard the door. Alex came in with a strange brightness on his face. His eyes lit up the way they used to when he spoke about Maria with a passion he couldn't hide. "Mom," he said hoarsely, leaning against the doorway, "I want you to meet someone." I stopped what I was doing and looked at him, feeling a flutter of nerves. "Someone special?" I asked, trying to sound calm. Alex smiled, a smile I hadn't seen in so long. "Yes, you're going to like her a lot," he said with confidence. I nodded, wiping my hands on my apron to hide the worry beginning to form inside me. After Maria, I wasn't sure anyone could fill the void she left. Not for Alex, not for Leo, and not for me. That night, Ava came in. She stepped into my home wearing an elegant light blue dress, her hair styled in perfect waves framing her face. Her lips painted a soft red that curved into a smile. That smile, I have to admit, was captivating, as though she had practiced it to charm anyone. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Williams," she said softly, lowering her head a little. I smiled back, welcomed her inside, and poured her a cup of hot, fragrant coffee. "Your home feels so warm," Ava commented as her eyes wandered across the family photos on the wall, stopping at one of Maria holding a very small Leo. I nodded and thanked her, but she stared at that picture longer than I would have wanted, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Dinner continued in an atmosphere I tried to keep pleasant. I brought out the dishes I'd spent all afternoon preparing. Corn tortilla tacos, enchiladas covered in red sauce, and a fresh mango salad, Leo's favorite. Alex sat beside Ava, his eyes fixed on her. His happiness showed in every movement. "Mom, Ava works in the marketing department at my company. She's amazing at her job," he said proudly. Ava smiled and served me an enchilada with a graceful, deliberate motion. "Mrs. Williams, this is wonderful. You have to show me how to make it," she said with a friendly look. I gave a polite smile and replied kindly, but a small unease stayed with me. Something in the way she spoke and laughed felt like I was watching a performance. My grandson, Leo, sat at the end of the table, unusually silent. Normally he wouldn't stop talking about school, but that evening he just picked at his plate without lifting his head. I noticed he avoided Ava's eyes, like he was trying to disappear into himself. Ava leaned over, pulled a chocolate bar from her purse, and placed it in front of him with a bright smile. "This is for you. It's really good, Leo," she said in a sugary voice as if trying to charm him. But Leo didn't move. His little hands clutched his utensils. Then he simply turned away without touching the candy. I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, and something in my chest tightened. Alex frowned, about to reprimand him. "Leo, what's the matter with you? Ava is giving you a treat." I stepped in quickly. "It's nothing. He's probably just tired. Let him be," I said. Alex sighed, said no more, and poured Ava more wine, as if trying to lift the mood. Lucy, my adopted daughter, was also at the table. She sat opposite me, eating quietly. But I noticed the way her expression shifted when Ava slipped her hand into Alex's under the table. Lucy has always been sensitive, and I know she loves Alex like a brother. But sometimes I wonder if it isn't something deeper. When Ava reached for his hand, Lucy froze with her fingers around her glass, tightening slightly. She didn't speak. She just bowed her head and resumed eating. But that silence carried more weight than any words. I wanted to ask her what was wrong, to understand her sadness, but I knew it wasn't the moment. After dinner, Ava insisted on doing the dishes, even though I turned her down several times. "Mrs. Williams, go rest. Let me take care of it," she said with exaggerated eagerness. I finally agreed and watched her walk into the kitchen, roll up her sleeves, and hum a cheerful tune while cleaning. I must admit she handled everything perfectly. The dishes neatly arranged, the sink spotless. For a moment I thought, maybe this girl is truly considerate. But when I went back to the living room, I found Leo sitting and coloring, his small hands gripping a crayon. Ava walked over, sat beside him, and praised him. "You draw so nicely, Leo. What is it? Let me see." But he immediately dropped the crayon and leaned back with a wary look, as if she were dangerous. Ava glanced at me and quickly forced a smile to cover the awkward moment. "Such a shy boy," she said in that same sweet tone. But I caught something odd flicker in her eyes. Alex, meanwhile, didn't notice anything. He was too busy pouring more wine, sharing funny stories from work, and laughing every time Ava joked. The evening ended with my son completely content, walking Ava to the door with his eyes locked on her, like no one else existed. I stood watching them leave with a strange heaviness inside me, as if something wasn't quite right. Time passed and Ava slowly became part of our daily life. One weekend morning, with bright California sunlight pouring through the windows, I was knitting a scarf when Ava showed up, smiling broadly. "Mrs. Williams, I want to take Leo to the park today. Is that okay?" she asked with enthusiasm. I looked at Leo, who was on the floor playing with his wooden blocks, his face unreadable. "Of course. I'm sure he'd enjoy that," I said, forcing a smile, even though I felt a little unsure. Alex was at work, and I thought maybe some fresh air would do Leo good. Ava took his hand and walked him to the door while I watched them go, a strange weight settling in my chest. When they came back, Ava entered with a triumphant smile. He had such a great time. He wouldn't stop going down the slide, and he even asked for another ice cream, she said excitedly. But when I looked at Leo, I saw dried dirt stains smeared across the blue shirt I had ironed that morning. He was silent, toy car in hand, saying nothing about the outing. "Did you enjoy it, sweetheart?" I asked, kneeling to stroke his hair. He just gave a small nod and looked away. I wanted to ask more, to understand his silence, but Ava cut in with her ever-sweet tone. "I already told you, Mrs. Williams, he loved it." I nodded, but inside a small piece of doubt began to take shape. Another day while Alex was at the office, Ava stopped by unexpectedly. I was in the kitchen preparing chili when I heard her talking to Leo in the living room. At first, her voice sounded gentle, but then I heard a sharp sentence. "Hold still, Leo. Don't make a mess. You're a big boy. but you still act like a baby." I froze, my hands over the onion I was chopping, a cold shiver running through me. I stepped out of the kitchen, and instantly, Ava switched her tone back to sweetness, as if nothing had happened. "Our Leo is so bright. Look at the tall tower he built," she said, gesturing to the blocks he was stacking, her smile beaming. But Leo pressed his lips together and looked at me like he was asking for help. I forced a smile and said, "Yes, he's very clever," though uneasiness was already taking root inside me like a thorn. I tried to reassure myself. Maybe she just wasn't used to children. Everyone is awkward at first. Leo's 7th birthday is a memory I'll never forget. Lucy spent the whole morning baking a chocolate cake, his favorite. When she arrived with it and set it on the table, candles glowing, Leo screamed with joy. His face lit up for the first time in months. "Aunt Lucy, this is my favorite cake," he said, running to hug her. She smiled, patted his hair, and told him gently, "I made it for you, sweetheart. Eat a lot." I watched them with a warm heart, feeling that the family light was flickering back to life. Ava was there too, but she only clapped half-heartedly, standing off to the side with a strained smile. Her only gift to Leo was a flat pat on the shoulder and a "Happy birthday, champ." I watched Leo pull back slightly, avoiding her eyes, and my chest tightened again. I wanted to speak up, but I stayed silent, telling myself not to interfere. On another day, Alex took Ava and Leo to the grocery store. I didn't go, but when they came back, I heard Ava complaining in an annoyed voice. Leo dropped an entire bag of candy at checkout, and I had to pay for it. What a clumsy kid. Alex frowned and turned to scold his son. "Leo, you're not a little boy anymore. You have to be more careful." I saw Leo lower his head, his hands clasped, and his eyes looking toward me as if begging for help. I hurried over and placed my hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, sweetheart. It was just some candy." But inside, I couldn't understand why Ava lost her temper so quickly with a child. Why couldn't she show the same tenderness Maria always had? One afternoon when I went to pick Leo up from school, his teacher pulled me aside and spoke softly but with concern. "Mrs. Williams, Leo's been very quiet lately and seems withdrawn. Is something going on at home?" I froze for a moment but tried to brush it off. "I'm sure it's just the changes, Mrs. Davis. Nothing to worry about." But on the way home, Leo tugged at my blouse and, in a trembling voice, said, "Grandma, I don't want to go home with Miss Ava." I stopped, knelt down to meet his clear eyes, and felt my chest tighten. "Why do you say that, darling? Miss Ava loves you," I told him. But the moment the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. Leo shook his head with an expression full of certainty. "No, Grandma, she doesn't love me." I stroked his hair, trying to soothe him, but deep down, I couldn't deny that he was right. Lucy, who was nearby, heard it all. She turned away without a word, but I saw the slight movement of her shoulders as if she were silently holding back a sigh. All those little moments, all those subtle warnings. I had seen them, but I chose not to face them. Then came the day of my son's wedding. That afternoon, the golden Florida sun poured through the tall windows, filling the ballroom with a glowing light, as if the sky itself wanted to celebrate my son's joy. I sat at table 8 with my grandson, Leo, and Lucy, my adopted daughter. Leo was playing with his red toy car, whispering a gentle, "Vroom, vroom." I looked at him, and my heart filled with affection. Lucy, wearing a simple beige dress, sat on the other side, occasionally leaning toward him to whisper something in his ear, with a smile as warm as morning sunlight. "Have another little piece of bread, sweetheart," she said, breaking off a bit for him. The sight made me smile, giving me a moment of comfort. Even after everything our family had endured, having Lucy and Leo there always warmed my soul. Alex, my son, wearing a sharp navy blue suit, moved between the tables, raising glasses with relatives. His face glowed with joy. His bright smile looked as though he were trying to erase all the darkness that followed Maria's passing. I watched him with a mix of pride and sorrow. I wanted to believe he had truly found happiness again, that Ava radiant in her beaded wedding gown, would give him a new home. But whenever my eyes met Ava's, laughing loudly for the cameras, never letting go of her wine glass, a small thorn settled deeper in my chest. Her smile looked too perfect, like a mask placed with precision. Soft jazz floated through the room, blending with lively conversations. The servers moved quietly, offering appetizers, crispy crackers, a fragrant cheese dip, and plates of fresh shrimp arranged beautifully. I noticed Leo only took a cracker, then gently pushed the shrimp platter away from him. I frowned and whispered, "You don't like it, darling." He shook his head and looked away, as if hiding something. I wanted to ask more, but a relative interrupted cheerfully. "And Leo's being such a good boy, Betty. Look how big he is now." I smiled and replied, "He's a clever little man." But inside I was unsettled. Leo had never reacted to food like that. In the distance, I saw Ava glance toward our table. For a brief second, the smile on her face tightened, just enough for me to notice before she turned away to toast with another guest. I tried to push away my unease, telling myself I was imagining things. But then everything shifted in a heartbeat. Leo, still playing with his toy car, pushed it too far, and it rolled to the floor. He bent down to grab it but suddenly froze, his eyes wide and fixed under the table. I leaned over to ask what was wrong, when he pulled out a small piece of paper, folded in 4, his hands shaking and his face pale. He clutched my hand and whispered urgently, "Grandma, let's go. Please, let's go now." My pulse began to race, pounding against my ribs. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to remain composed, but his frightened expression made it impossible to stay calm. Still trembling, he whispered something that sent ice through my veins. "You didn't look under the table, did you?" His words cut through me like cold steel. I crouched, lifted the white tablecloth and scanned the shadowed space beneath. The paper lay beside his chair, small, harmless looking, yet full of danger. I picked it up with shaking hands, feeling the world close in until only Leo, myself, and that cursed note seemed to exist. I unfolded it. The glow from the candles was enough to make out the messy writing. "Table. Add shrimp to the child's serving." Just a few words, but they struck me like lightning. I instinctively crushed the paper in my fist. The music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, all of it faded into a distant blur, as though everything around me were sinking into a void. Ava, stunning in her wedding gown, was still laughing in the corner, raising her glass, with a guest as though nothing could ever trouble her. Alex was busy taking photos with his co-workers, smiling as if it were the happiest day of his life. But for me, everything in that room had become a lie, a stage hiding the horrible truth I had just uncovered. I clenched the paper so hard it felt like it might sear my skin. Leo, the grandchild I cherished more than life itself, had almost been the target of something wicked, right there at his own father's wedding. I turned to Lucy, sitting beside Leo. Alarm filled her eyes when she saw my face. "Look after Leo, please," I said, doing my best to keep my voice steady, though I knew the tremor showed. Lucy nodded and drew Leo close, holding him tightly like a shield. "Where are you going?" she whispered, her voice aching with worry. I only shook my head because I had no idea what I was about to do. I hurried into the hallway, my legs heavy as if weighed down, but my heart pounding, urging me forward. Near the bar, a group of waiters stood chatting. Their laughter clashed painfully with the storm inside me. I spotted David, the young man who had brought dishes to our table several times. He had a gentle face and a pleasant smile. But right then I couldn't think about that. I strode straight to him, held the paper up to his face, and demanded firmly, "Do you know who gave you this?" David glanced at it, and his entire expression changed. His easy smile vanished, replaced by panic. "Oh God, that's my note," he stammered, his hands shaking as if he wanted to snatch it away. "A woman handed it to me and I must have dropped it when I was carrying the tray." His words were like a bolt of clarity in the chaos, but stirred my fear even more. Who gave it to you? I pressed, nearly shouting, losing all control. David stepped back, startled. I don't know her name, ma'am. She just told me to hand it to the chef. The note didn't mention who sent it. Fury burst inside me like a blazing fire. Even more reason, I said, stepping closer, my voice shaking with anger and fear. You're aware my grandson has a severe shrimp allergy. A single bite could end his life. David's face drained of color, his eyes widening in shock as he shook his head over and over. Ma'am, I honestly didn't know. I only did what the note said. I had no idea about anything. His voice cracked as if he was also caught in this nightmare. The other waiters started whispering to each other, glancing around with curiosity and concern. I crumpled the note in my fist, feeling it burn against my skin. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash everything. But I knew I couldn't let my emotions take over. Leo was waiting for me, and I had to keep him safe. From inside the ballroom, the MC's cheerful voice announced it was time to prepare for the main course. His words felt like a cruel warning that time was slipping away, and if I hesitated, Leo might walk straight into a deadly trap. I inhaled deeply, trying to steady my trembling body. I knew silence wasn't an option. If I didn't act immediately, I'd live with the guilt forever. I went back into the ballroom with the paper still clenched in my hand. Undeniable proof of a dark plan. The hall was still bathed in candlelight, and the jazz band's music blended with the guests' laughter. The servers moved quietly with the main dishes, and the scent of roasted meat and gravy filled the air. But to me, everything felt like a lie. I focused on Leo, sitting close to Lucy, his bright eyes full of fear locked on me as though I were his only shelter in the storm. I took Leo's small hand, feeling his shaky fingers resting in my palm. Then, as if something invisible pushed me, I stood up suddenly, my voice rising clear and firm over the music and chatter. One moment, please, before anyone starts eating, I need to address something. The entire ballroom went silent as if time itself had frozen. Every gaze turned to table 8, where I stood with Leo at my side, and Lucy seated with determination burning in her eyes. The clinking of glasses stopped, the whispering faded, and all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. I raised the paper. The scrawled words on it were an undeniable accusation. Who wrote this note asking for shrimp to be added to the child's meal at table 8? I demanded, my voice shaking with outrage but forced into sharp clarity. Murmurs began to ripple like small waves across still water. Some guests glanced around, frowning with confusion and curiosity. I felt Leo's eyes locked on me, silently begging me to protect him. Alex rushed over from another table, smiling at first, then quickly frowning when he saw my expression. "Mom, what's happening?" he asked, completely lost. I didn't respond right away. I simply set the paper on the table and slid it toward him. "Read it," I said harshly, though inside I was falling apart. Alex picked it up. His eyes moved over the words, and I watched his face turn ghostly pale, while his hands trembled. "What does this mean?" he asked in disbelief, glancing at me and then at Leo like he was searching for logic. Ava, radiant in her wedding dress, stepped closer, a frown paired with perfectly staged surprise. "What is all this? Some kind of sick joke?" she said softly, but I caught a flicker of fear in her eyes. I stared straight into them, my chest tight with anger and dread. "My grandson is allergic to shrimp," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "This isn't a prank. This is attempted murder." My words crashed through the room like thunder, dragging the hall into a chilling silence. Some guests gaped in shock, while others began whispering, their glances shifting between me and Ava. Ava let out a forced laugh, a mask to keep her composure. "Please, Mrs. Williams, there's no name on the note." "Are you really going to trust a story a child claims he found?" she said with mocking sweetness, trying to make me look like a delusional old woman. Doubting voices started murmuring. "Maybe it's all a misunderstanding. Who would do something like that at a wedding?" Heat flooded my veins. Ava's nerve nearly left me speechless. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip off that wedding gown and expose her. But I knew I had to hold myself together. For Leo. For our family. Suddenly Lucy rose, clutching Leo close, her eyes burning into Ava. "That's enough, Ava." Her voice was cold but soaked with pain, as if she couldn't hold it back any longer. Lucy stepped forward and slapped her, the sharp crack echoing through the room. The sound shattered the silence and the lies. Everyone froze, even me. Ava lifted a hand to her face, eyes wide in shock, then spun toward Alex, sobbing. You see? She's insane with jealousy. That's why she's attacking me. What did I ever do to deserve this? Lucy didn't retreat, her fists tight, her voice raw with fury. The only cruel one here is you. You tried to hurt an innocent child at your own wedding. Her words sliced through the heavy air like a blade. Faces once doubtful turned toward Ava, and I saw her go rigid, her fake smile fading. Alex stood frozen. His gaze bounced from me to Lucy to Ava, like he was stuck between two realities. Lucy, calm down, he said with a shaky voice. But I could tell he no longer knew who to trust. The whispers in the crowd swelled like a rising tide, eyes darting between me, Ava, and little Leo, trembling in Lucy's arms. Ava tried to cling to her false calm, but I saw her hands tremble as she spoke. This is lies. Someone planted that note to ruin our wedding. Her tone was sharp, but I caught the panic in her eyes as though her perfect mask was starting to fall apart. I couldn't take her brazenness any longer. The fury inside me erupted like fire tearing through the last of my restraint. I slammed the table, making the glasses rattle. That's enough, I shouted, my voice so icy it silenced even the band. David, come here! The young waiter stepped forward nervously from a corner, his face drained of color. His eyes darted around as if he were trapped between the truth and the storm about to break. I held the note out, my voice shaking but steady. Confirm it. Is this the one you received? David nodded quickly, stammering. Yes, ma'am, it is. A woman from another table handed it to me, and I dropped it by accident while carrying the tray. He lowered his head, avoiding my eyes. My blood simmered, but I forced myself to remain composed, knowing every person in the ballroom was watching. Ava rushed to interrupt, her voice sharp and nearly frantic. You're wrong. I don't know anything about that. But before she could continue, a frail voice filled with grief came from behind. Gloria, Ava's younger sister, burst into tears and stood up. It wasn't my sister Ava who handed it to me, she said, shaking as tears streamed down her face. She asked me to give it to the waiter. I swear I had no idea what was in it. A gasp swept across the room. My God, how is that even possible? I looked at Gloria, and my anger softened. She was barely 18. Her eyes were swollen and full of confusion, like she had also been dragged into this nightmare. Ava whirled around and screamed at her sister, her face twisted with rage. Shut up, Gloria. How dare you invent lies to destroy your own sister? Her tone was sharp, but I saw her lips quiver as if she were barely holding the truth back. Gloria stepped away, shaking from head to toe, and managed to say through her tears, I'm not lying, sister. I only did what you told me. Her words sliced through Ava's deception like a blade, leaving the entire hall stunned. An older relative nearby shook his head, voice filled with shock. How can someone not even spare an innocent child? Amid the uproar, Lucy walked forward, holding Leo close, and said in a frosty tone, If you keep denying it, we can ask them to check the ballroom's security footage. Everything will be revealed in minutes. Her statement dropped like a stone into water, sending panic rippling everywhere. Ava's face went pale, her lips pressed tight, her eyes darting for an escape. But there was none. She remained silent, and that silence was the clearest confession I needed. Alex stood frozen, his hand shaking on Leo's shoulder, staring in horror at the woman he had just married. His voice cracked as though he were clinging to one last hope that it was all a mistake. But his eyes, shifting between the note and Leo, revealed the truth. I saw his heart break, just as mine had when I realized the plot. An uncle rose, shaking his head in disgust. Unbelievable. Such malice on a day meant for joy. His voice trembled as if holding back fury. After Lucy's mention of the cameras, a chilling silence swept across the hall. Ava, the woman I once tried to welcome into my family, stood motionless, face drained, lips sealed, searching for a final excuse. But the truth had already caught her, and there was nowhere to hide. Alex, my son, walked toward her slowly, his jaw tight and his eyes red, and asked, "Ava, tell me honestly, is it true?" His voice quivered, as if begging for even a sliver of hope that this was some horrible error. But I knew deep inside he already felt the harsh reality. Ava stepped back, forcing a crooked smile, but her eyes exposed her fear. "You don't trust me?" she said, voice cracking, hoping to hold on to the last piece of Alex's faith. "They're framing me. I didn't do anything." But her words came out weak, like wind dying out before a storm arrives. I looked at her, my heart heavy with anger and sorrow. The woman I believed would bring joy to my son now stood before me like a stranger, a threat I had never seen coming. Lucy, my adopted daughter, placed a hand on Alex's shoulder and said through clenched emotion, "Leo almost died because of this woman." Her voice cut through the air like a blade. Ava screamed desperately, "Shut up! You're just a jealous intruder." But Lucy held her ground, trembling with fury, yet standing as a shield for Leo. "How dare you call me jealous?" Lucy replied in a glacial tone. "Look into this child's eyes and say you didn't try to harm him." Leo clung to me, his small hand gripping mine, as if he feared being dragged back into the nightmare. Guests began rising from their seats. The celebration had completely shattered. "A relative of ours, Mr. Johnson, slammed his hand on the table in anger. This is shameful. We cannot ignore this." Voices of support surged like a tide, drowning Ava under a wave of contemptuous stares. Alex, torn between truth and love, cried out, his voice breaking with grief and rage. "Leo is my child. You tried to kill my son at our own wedding." His words struck straight into Ava's heart, and she burst into tears. But I knew those tears were not for guilt, only for being exposed. I laid the note on the table and declared firmly, "Anyone who tries to harm my grandson will never again set foot in this family." My voice rang out, unwavering, like a verdict. Ava lifted her head, eyes blazing, but I saw defeat in them. She hadn't only lost to me, she had lost to the truth itself. The hotel security team approached and, respectfully but firmly, told Ava to leave the hall. "Ma'am, please come with us," one of them said coldly. Ava stepped back, looking for someone to support her, but no one did. Guests shook their heads, setting down their half-finished drinks and sighing in disbelief. "Unimaginable," someone whispered. "How can a person be that cruel?" another muttered, horrified. Alex stood frozen, hands on his head like he was holding his world together. Then, as if his strength had drained away, he slowly knelt in front of Leo and choked out, "Son, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you." Tears streamed down his cheeks, and I felt my heart split in two. I helped Alex up, gripping his shoulders, and said in a solemn but steady voice, "Thankfully, we stopped it in time. This fake happiness ends right here." I looked at Ava, being escorted out among looks of disgust, and in my heart I understood she never was, and never would be, part of this family. In the days that followed that horrific wedding, my family was caught in a silent storm where wounds still bled and questions lingered in the air. I felt like I had just woken from a nightmare where I nearly lost Leo, my grandson, whom I love more than life itself. News of the disastrous wedding spread everywhere, from quiet neighborhood streets to the gossip of distant relatives. The house phone wouldn't stop ringing. Some people blamed Alex for trusting Ava so blindly. Others felt sorry for Leo, the innocent child who almost became the target of something vile. But to me, every call was just a painful echo of what we'd survived. Alex withdrew into himself after everything. He was no longer the joyful man in the navy blue suit from that day. Instead, he quietly drove Leo to and from school, his eyes filled with sorrow and regret. The name Ava, like a curse, was never spoken in the house again. I looked at Alex with a heavy heart, knowing he needed time to heal, to rebuild himself after being deceived by the woman he loved. I didn't fault him. Love can make anyone blind. But I also knew we had to rise from the ruins as a family. I kept caring for Leo the way I had since Maria passed, I made his favorite meals like cheesy pasta or soft pudding, trying to restore his sense of safety. But the one who truly mended Leo's heart was not me. It was Lucy, my adopted daughter. Every morning she packed his lunch for school, carefully choosing foods without shrimp or anything that could risk his life. She even wrote a small note for the teacher explaining his allergy with a smiley face drawn in crayon, which he adored. "Aunt Lucy, you draw so good," Leo would say when he opened his lunchbox, and I'd see his eyes sparkle as though part of his lost innocence had returned. Each afternoon, Lucy took Leo to the nearby park. I would watch them from a distance, seeing her teach him how to fly a kite, showing him how to hold the string so it would soar high. Once, Leo slipped off the slide, and Lucy rushed to him, lifted him, brushed the dust from his clothes, and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm right here." His bright laughter echoed, a sound I thought was gone forever, and it soothed my heart like medicine. I looked at Lucy with endless gratitude, because she wasn't just a sister to him. She was like a second mother, gently filling the gap Maria had left. One night, when Leo had a high fever, I saw Lucy stay up beside him until morning. She sat on a chair next to his bed, placing cool cloths on his forehead, while softly telling him a story about a brave sparrow flying through a storm. I stood at the door quietly, noticing that Alex's eyes lingered on Lucy for a long while. It was a complicated look, filled with guilt and thankfulness, as if he was finally realizing what he'd ignored all along. I didn't comment. I just stepped away, giving them their space. But in my heart, I began to believe that maybe a light was beginning to break through our family's long darkness. One evening, during one of the rare dinners where we were all seated together around the table, eating the warm pasta I made, Leo suddenly looked up. His clear eyes rested on Lucy. "I want Aunt Lucy to be my mommy," he said softly but distinctly, as if he had been holding the thought for a long time. The whole table went quiet. Lucy blushed and lowered her head, gripping her spoon to hide her embarrassment. Alex froze, his eyes filling with tears, as though Leo's words had struck something deep inside him. I smiled. I placed my hand on Alex's shoulder and said gently, "Real happiness, son, isn't found in a sparkling wedding dress, but in an honest heart that knows how to love." Alex looked at me, then at Lucy, and I saw a faint light of hope in his eyes. Time passed, and Ava vanished completely from our lives, like a poisonous wind that had blown away. Leo became cheerful again, always close to Lucy with his red toy car and the drawing she made for him. I watched him running and playing in the yard, feeling relief mixed with pain, thinking about everything he had endured. One day, Alex held Lucy's hand. He stood before me in the living room and said in a shaky but sure voice, "Mom, I know I was wrong. I was blind. I put Leo at risk. But this time, I won't let go of the person who truly stood by our family." Lucy lowered her head, her cheeks flushed, but I saw a glowing smile on her lips. I nodded as tears streamed silently down my face. "Son, all I want is for you and Leo to be happy," I said through a breaking voice. That night, after Leo had fallen asleep, I sat by the window, gazing at the silver moon spreading across the quiet street. Its gentle glow felt like a reminder that even after the darkest storms, light always finds a way through. I whispered to myself, family isn't always made by blood. Sometimes it's chosen with love and bravery. After that dreadful wedding, a new chapter filled with light truly began for us. I looked out at the yard, where the kite Lucy and Leo flew the day before still hung, and I knew that even though old wounds might never fully disappear, we would move forward together, with love and strength holding us up. After all we had faced, I learned something vital. Life brings losses no one can replace, betrayals that shatter the heart, but real love will always shine the way forward. Family isn't only formed by blood, but also by choice and the courage to shield each other from harm. It's sacrifice and genuine affection that bring lasting joy, not shiny appearances. I hope everyone listening remembers this. You must let your heart guide you, because sometimes a small act of care can save a life, and it's compassion that pulls us out of nights that feel endless. The story you've heard has had its names and places changed to protect those involved. We don't share this to judge anyone, but in the hope that someone will pause and reflect. How many mothers are suffering silently in their own homes? I truly wonder. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you stay silent for the sake of peace? Or would you dare to confront everything to reclaim your voice? I would love to hear your thoughts, because every story can become a candle lighting the way for someone else. May God bless us always, and I believe courage will lead us to brighter days. And now, on the final screen, I'll leave you two of the channel's favorite stories. I'm sure they'll surprise you.